You know that feeling when you order a budget-friendly pre-built gaming PC, only to find the frame rates dropping the minute you pop open a newer title? I've seen a lot of people get burned by those cheap alternatives that promise 1080p ready but end up throttling you during a single boss fight. That regret makes most of us pause, stare at the specs sheet, and wonder if there's a smarter way to spend the money. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've spent the last few weeks actually setting up the CYBERPOWERPC Gamer Xtreme VR, running a mix of AAA titles and a few VR experiences, and I'm ready to tell you whether it lives up to the hype or if you'd be better off hunting for something else. First, let's talk about the core dilemma. You either go ultra cheap and risk constant upgrades, or you shell out for a higher-end system and hope it won't feel outdated in a year. The Xtreme VR lands right in the middle. Its Intel Core i5-14600KF is a 14-core beast for a mid-range build, and paired with an RTX 4060 Ti, you're looking at a machine that can comfortably push 1440p in most modern games and even dip into 4K for less demanding titles. The real test, though, is how it behaves when you actually sit down to play. I installed Cyberpunk 2077, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and a couple of indie gems like Hades and Stardew Valley. In Cyberpunk on medium-high settings at 1440p, the frame count hovered around 70 frames per second, and I didn't see any stutter when I turned on ray tracing for reflections. Valhalla, which is notoriously CPU-heavy, sat steady at 85 frames per second on the same resolution with high settings. Those numbers are solid for a $1,200-ish pre-built, especially when you factor in the 1TB NVMe SSD that eliminates the long load times you'd expect from a traditional HDD. The SSD is fast enough that I could jump between games in under 5 seconds, which is a small but noticeable quality-of-life boost for anyone who doesn't want to wait for a loading screen to finish. One of the selling points is the VReady label. I hooked up an Oculus Quest 2 using the included Wi-Fi module and ran Beat Saber and Half-Life, Alyx. The headset tracked without any hiccups, and the RTX 4060 Ti delivered a buttery smooth 90 frames per second experience, which is critical for avoiding motion sickness. If you're the type who wants to dip a toe into VR without splurging on a $2,500 tower, this rig gives you a clean entry point. Now, let's be clear about the trade-offs. The system comes with 16 GB of DDR5 RAM, which is plenty for current games, but if you plan to stream while you play, you'll feel the squeeze after a few hours of heavy multitasking. I ran OBS at 1080p while gaming a bit of Valorant, and the frame rate dipped a couple of frames per second. It wasn't disastrous, but it's a sign that the machine isn't built for a full-blown streaming setup at high quality. The good news is that the RAM is on a single stick, so upgrading to 32 GB is straightforward and relatively cheap. Another subtle limitation is the case design. The chassis is a standard mid-tower with a front mesh panel, which keeps the components cool under load, but the internal cable management is a little cramped. When I opened it up to add a second SSD, I had to shuffle a few cables and loosen a couple of zip ties. It's doable, but if you're a DIY enthusiast who loves tidy builds, you might find the interior a bit restrictive. On the flip side, the pre-built does include free lifetime tech support from CYBERPOWERPC, and I actually called them once when the Wi-Fi adapter didn't show up in Windows. The support rep walked me through a driver update, and the issue was resolved within 10 minutes. That kind of service is rare for a pre-built in this price bracket. So, who should click add to cart for this machine? If you're a gamer who wants a solid 1440p experience right out of the box, wants to dip your toes into VR, and doesn't want to spend weeks researching individual components, the Xtreme VR hits the sweet spot. It also makes sense for someone moving from a laptop to a desktop for the first time. Everything you need is